Hello. Welcome to Module 2, Foundations of American Governance. In this video, which is the second of two on this subject, we will continue with the idea of representation of the people. Among the discussion topics will be the notion of sovereignty and some of the other problems of majority rule. Who do you think has the supreme authority, or the final say in matters of great importance? The principles of American government require the sovereignty of the people. They express their will through a constitutional majority, although they themselves do not rule directly. The Articles of Confederation was America's first attempt at establishing a national union. Given the recent experience with Great Britain, the former colonies had little liking for a centralized government. The main idea of the Articles of Confederation was that each sovereign state would pursue its own interests and be beholden to no higher interest or authority. However, in many of the states, unchecked legislative majorities frequently trampled on the natural rights of minorities and disregarded the nearly powerless federal government. Most of the states possessed a weak executive and a powerful legislature that was dependent on a frequently changing majority opinion. Frequently, this overly reactive legislative supremacy was coupled with short terms of service. In Vices of the Political System of the United States, Madison listed 7 defects common to state government during this time. The last 3 flaws discuss states passing laws that were too unworkable, too unjust, and too numerous to understand. Poor fiscal policies during this time led to massive debt, depression, and inflation. Ill-advised laws concerning currency were passed by an out-of-control majority, which resulted in debtors paying off their creditors with practically worthless paper money. Essentially, the majority was able to use the power of government to vote itself out of debt while violating the natural property rights of creditors. During the subsequent framing of the Constitution, delegates would express their concern with this kind of flagrant injustice more than the misguided economic policies. Jefferson mentioned in A Summary View of the Rights of British America that pure majority rule can be as despotic as the rule of a single individual. He said, "History has informed us that bodies of men, as well as individuals, susceptible of the spirit of tyranny." He continued in Notes on the State of Virginia, "All the powers of government, legislative, executive, and judiciary, result to the legislative body. The concentrating these in the same hands is precisely the definition of despotic government. It will be no alleviation that these powers will be exercised by a plurality of hands, and not by a single one. 173 despots would surely be as oppressive as one. As we have discussed, republics must guard society against government oppression. At the same time, they must protect one part of society from injustices committed by another part." Alexander Hamilton, writing in Federalist No. 35, identified 4 distinct economic interests in the new republic: mechanics and manufacturers, merchants, the learned class, or lawyers, physicians, ministers, and intellectuals, and farmers. While economic representation by all 4 sectors would be ideal, he reasoned, this would have been and still is impossible practically, especially in an interconnected economy. Better to have representatives who can make decisions based on the common good. This experience of unstable and unjust government led delegates to once more meet in Independence Hall in Philadelphia and develop a constitution. The central argument concerned the role of centralized government and the rights of the states. In the Federalist Papers, which we have repeatedly referenced, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay wrote carefully articulated arguments that called for a constitution and a central government. They also addressed the concerns of the Anti-Federalists, a loose assemblage of those who opposed the erosion of state sovereignty and the concentration of power in a national government. The revolution had fought for local control as much as the larger issue of freedom. The Anti-Federalists were suspicious of any consolidation of authority. They were largely correct in the long term, as the federal government would accumulate greater degrees of power during and following the Civil War. Which brings us to another of the chief points, that of factions. At this time, political parties were not the powerful entities they are now. Instead, factions were groups of people or special interests, be they in the majority or the minority, who shared positions sometimes contrary to the common good. Madison defined factions in Federalist No. 10, "By a faction, I understand a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion, or of interest, adverse to the rights of other citizens, or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community." The Federalists and Anti-Federalists were both concerned that factions were dangerous to the public interest. This is different than the temporary or particular interests of a group. Two ways to deal with majority faction is to eliminate its causes by destroying liberty or giving all citizens the same opinions, passions, and interests. Or, control its effects. This second approach is both more realistic and more beneficial. Controlling the effects occur by electing representatives to filter the people's passions and allowing reason to take precedence, and expanding the republic's physical territory so the greater number of citizens will possess a greater variety of interests and opinions. There is one problem inherent in majority rule. If the majority has the right to express the will of the people, its decisions must be the result of calm reason rather than unpredictable passions. If you remember Module 1, Section 2, Polybius demonstrated how a democracy is quite capable of becoming tyrannical. To solve this issue, the framers designed the Constitution to allow the people the opportunity to make sound laws that advance the common good. Practical reason is the general human capacity for resolving, through reflection, what ought to be done and what should be done. This does not explain, but, instead, considers possibilities and courses of action. Madison warned in Federalist No. 55, in all very numerous assemblies, of whatever character composed, passion never fails to wrest the scepter from reason. Had every Athenian citizen been a Socrates, every Athenian assembly would still have been a mob. This passage argues that the public's thoughtful and rational judgment should be the primary force guiding the government rather than emotion or impulsive decisions. Madison did not think passions should be entirely dismissed. Ambitions and desires are important, but wanting the right things are more vital. Choices are a combination of thinking and desiring. Choosing well will not only allow you to think better about what you want, but you will want the right things more and more. The structure of the Constitution is designed to prompt the proper collaboration between reason and passion. Concurrently, the government should be responsible for managing and tempering the people's passions. Legitimate political systems are built on persuasion, discussion, and reasoned debate, not coercion and passion. They may require violence to install a new, freer government similar to the American Revolution. They may require violence to endure and to defend. But, they must not operate in their regular mechanisms with citizens committing violence on one another. A constitutional system of representation allows decisions to spread out over time. Indeed, due to differing terms of office, a complete change of elected officials in the federal government could hypothetically be accomplished in 6 years. This places a premium on the opinions held by the electorate and restrains decisions made on the spur of the moment. As Madison said in Federalist No. 49, it is the reason, alone, of the public, that ought to control and regulate the government. The passions ought to be controlled and regulated by the government. Sovereignty answers the question of who should rule and why. King George and his royal ministers were the executives of the state, while the king himself was sovereign. In ancient Athens, the citizenry was sovereign, and they simultaneously acted as the legislative branch. Ultimate authority rests with the people. When referring to the general will, Rousseau argued that people are the ultimate source of government power. In the American Republic, as we have discussed before, government is made legitimate by the consent of the people. Remember the preamble to the Constitution, which begins with, "We the people." Madison said in Federalist No. 63, the true distinction between ancient constitutions and the American governments lies in the total exclusion of the people, in their collective capacity, from any share in the latter, and not in the total exclusion of the representatives of the people from the administration of the former. In other words, the governed who have given their consent are sovereign, but they are excluded from the operation of government. Representative government requires a society separate from the government yet strong enough to control that great power. They do not make the laws, nor practice judicial review, nor execute the laws. The majority reflects popular will. Unanimity of opinion is a practical impossibility, so there will be disagreement and debate. In this eventuality, the majority of equal souls must take the place of unanimous consent and decide the great issues of the day. As Lincoln said in his first inaugural address, a majority held in restraint by constitutional checks and limitations, and always changing easily with deliberate changes of popular opinions and sentiments, is the only true sovereign of a free people. This is the basis for democratic elections and civic engagement. We will discuss the idea of checks and balances in the next section when we talk about auxiliary precautions. For now, you should know that the first check on government is the consent of the sovereign authority, the people. The second check is on the people. During the constitutional debates between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, one disagreement concerned the balance between the federal and local governments. The Anti-Federalists argued that power held at the lowest level possible was best. Their view was the norm for much of the country's history. Indeed, before World War II, the federal government consumed less than 10% of the country's gross domestic product annually. The Federalists' response was to ensure that every human exercise of power was restrained by reason. Thus, the federal government is powerful, yet it is one of enumerated powers. Constitutional forms have been implemented to limit power, including representation, the method by which we give our ongoing consent, and the separation between sovereignty and the government. Next time. In the next video, we will discuss auxiliary precautions, the mechanisms by which power is restrained and delegated in our republic. Until then, thank you for your time. If you want to learn more about the subjects we have discussed, here are the sources used for this section.